Thanks, Emma. We might let the Zoom audience in. So just for the people in the room, actually, I'll just use this. I'll use the mic. Just for everybody, for the people in the room and for the people on Zoom, we're just going to, because of the weather tonight, we're just going to go up a few minutes late because we know that it's really hard to get through when it's raining. Brisbane people just have a little panic, I think, whenever it rains like this. So we're going to go 5 minutes late to start, but we have let the Zoom audience in just so that they're not in cyberspace just waiting. So for everybody who's just joined us via Zoom, it is going to take us a few minutes just to let the last people in who are here for the event. If there's any, I gather you can all hear me on Zoom. If you know how to do the thumbs up, that would be awesome. If you can give me the thumbs up, if you can hear me okay on Zoom. Yep, I can see some people holding their thumbs up. That's awesome. Thank you very much. So we're just going to wait for a few minutes while our in real life audience manages to get through the crazy traffic. So we will welcome everyone in a few minutes. Just a bit of housekeeping though while you're waiting is the people on Zoom, you're all going to be on mute, but there is a chat function, and that chat function at some point very soon, Emma Kate is going to send you the link to the book, to purchase the book, and that's where you can chat and you can ask questions via that chat function at any time. So feel free to ask some questions if you'd like. And for the people in the real life room, we do have a toilet. So if you need it, if you go that way, there's a hidden set of stairs. Go up the stairs and go to the toilet that's right at the end of the corridor. There's two toilets, they both work, but the one at the end of the corridor is lovely and great. The other one makes a terrible noise, so we will all hear you flushing the toilet for about half an hour after you've done it. So maybe we'll leave that one during an event. So yes, I think that's all the housekeeping that I need to do before the event starts and before we get everyone in. But we will just wait another couple of minutes before we actually start. So please enjoy the ambience if you're in the room, and also just hang around if you're on Zoom, and we will welcome you very, very soon. Yeah, and we had like 42 bookings, so we normally get that, you know, that people not turning up. That's good. And we've got quite a lot of people in real life, so just give it another couple of minutes and then we'll close the door and all right, I'll come back in. All right, the time is now. Welcome, everybody. Please feel free to take your seats. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we meet on in this area, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to mention that because we're on Zoom, we are zooming out onto the lands of many different Aboriginal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders on the land that you are zooming in from. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, on that note, we're here tonight to celebrate the launch of a new book into the world. There's been so much excitement about this book. It's really lovely to actually be able to launch a book for the first time, and also to launch a book in real life for the first time. We've been doing so much on Zoom, and we know that there are a lot of Zoom audience here tonight, but I know that the people in real life are very much enjoying being here in the flesh and being able to get their book signed by the author as well, which is really great. And also, if you happen to be on Zoom, if you would like your book personally signed by the author, all you need to do is to email us at events@avidreader.com.au. And so that number that you got your Zoom link on, just email us during the event tonight, and we will email us your phone number, and we will give you a call from outside where it's quiet and talk to you about that. And we can you can purchase the book and get it personally signed, and we can send it to you. So that is all good for tonight. We'll be doing that quietly behind the scenes tonight. So the book is called Why Being Good Can Be Bad for You. Mixed reactions here. I don't think I've ever been good, so I don't think I need this book, but I think certain other members of the staff are really desperate to hear the talk tonight, Ashley. And maybe this is a book that you need in your life too. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful guests tonight. So we have Laura Dawson is going to do the conversation tonight. Hello, Laura. Laura is a lawyer and a writer, and with a keen interest in personal development, and she loves Kate's book and is looking forward to discussing the key concepts and understanding Kate's journey in the writing of this book. And we also have Kate Witteveen. Hello, Kate, who is, and yes, we can give her a clap now. And Kate is a success and empowerment coach, author and recovering perfectionist. One of those things that I really don't have in my life, so interested to hear about that. With a PhD in psychology and a passion for preventing burnout and enhancing well-being. She wrote her first book, Why Being Good Can Be Bad for You, in the hope that by sharing the lessons she learnt on her journey from compulsive good girl to burnt out academic, we've had plenty of those in the shop, that through that journey, she could help others to avoid the perils of perfectionism and the brutality of burnout. Kate is on a mission to enhance the health, well-being and happiness of as many people as possible. So I'm glad she's got a great big audience in the room today willing to listen to her words of wisdom. So I will now hand over to Laura. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll just get stuck in, I suppose, because I'm sure everyone's keen to hear about it. So what was your inspiration for writing this book, and how did you choose how to write about that?
All right, well, thank you everyone for being here, and it's really lovely to have you, and everyone on Zoom, hello, wherever you're coming in from. So I always wanted to write a book, but for a really long time, I had no idea what that would be about. And so when I left academia, I started working with amazing clients in my coaching business, and they were clever and they were accomplished and they were successful and they were really, really hard on themselves. And I went, oh, that sounds like me. So what happened over the course of these sessions with my clients, I would share some of my experiences and say, you know, I really understand where you're coming from. And they're like, you totally do. And so that became really obvious that my story wasn't just my story. and that it was a much bigger issue than I had realised, and that perhaps if I could use my story that I had experienced to help others like my amazing clients in a different way, then that seemed like a pretty good idea.
Well, I mean, I know that personally I have struggled with feeling stuck, and then upon reading your book, I found that it resonated quite strongly with things that I've experienced personally. And I've often struggled with wanting to do the right thing, even at the expense of my mental health, which is what you touch on in your book. But it can be really daunting to take that first leap and move into the unknown. So what advice would you have for someone who's wanting to make a change, but who's struggling with taking that first leap, I suppose?
Got a really good book for that. No, I think the first thing I would say is to really calculate what it's costing you to stay where you are. And it's helpful to remember that our brains are wired to keep us safe. And so what that means is that even if something's not going well, at least we know what it is. And so it can feel much safer to stay where we are than it is to take a chance on something that's unknown. So for me, probably the most difficult decision I've ever made was to leave academia. So in order to get to that point, I had to not only calculate the cost of staying stuck, I had to also identify what it was giving me to stay. So what was the benefit of staying? And I love a good list, so I wrote one. And on my list of reasons to stay, there was really logical, really rational, really sensible decisions. Things like a predictable income and great super. If you want good super, get into academia. But I realised that I also had stuff on there like free parking. And I was like, okay, that's great. But on the other side of the equation was my health was suffering and my well-being was suffering, and I felt lost and alone in my workplace. So it wasn't a case of how many things were keeping me there. It's what were those ones on the other side that I needed to explore further. So I think in terms of getting the confidence to leave, it's figuring out what's keeping you there to start with, and is it worth it when you look at a different kind of success metric.
Yeah, well, I suppose on that, when you're talking about things like that, you're talking about being able to tune in to your intuition, I suppose, in a way. And so while you talk about some of that in your book, do you have any other sort of strategies or tools that you've used which helped you personally beyond perhaps writing a list? Is there something else?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And if myself from 3 years ago had said, in your book, you're going to have a chapter called Tune In to Intuition, I would have gone, I don't think so. Because in the world of academia, we love evidence and we love science and we love proof. And what I realised is that I had trained myself to be very logical and very sensible and very in my head. And it was often at the expense of what I knew to be true for me. So tuning into intuition is very much about listening to what your body's telling you, despite what your brain is saying. And because what I found is that when you ask yourself what you think you should do, it's often very much about what other people expect of you. And I realised too that when I look back on the decisions that I'd made that I had come to regret, most of them were very sensible and completely disregarded how I felt about them. So it's a practice and it's a work in progress. I'm still getting better at it, but it is about just stopping and tuning in to how do I feel about this rather than what do I think about this. Yeah. You need both, the intellect and the intuition, but not at the expense of one or the other. You need to give them both a voice.
Well, just on that, there are some interesting sort of experiences from your life that you've included in the book, and I won't spoil them for you. I'll leave it so you can read your own when you buy your copy. But you've got a number of interesting anecdotes in, including case studies of clients and also of yourself in the book. So what made you decide to include the stories both of yourself and of your clients in your book?
I think for me, it was about telling my story, but also recognising that the inspiration for my book was my clients as well. And so there are elements of my story that were shared, but there are also elements that were actually better represented by stories of my clients. And also, I think I was really mindful that this book wasn't just about me. It was actually, and it wasn't for me. It was for whoever needed to hear it. And so I didn't want to make it just about me, because then it's really easy for people to go, oh yeah, that's just her story. Like that's not me. But by including other pieces of little stories and case studies from other people, it's like it's actually all of us who can relate to this kind of message. So I wanted to, broaden that application so that people didn't think it was just, this is not an autobiography by any means. There's a lot of me in there. I do apologise for that, but it's not just about that.
Fantastic. Well, so in the second half of the book, I'll talk about some of the theoretical stuff, because that was really interesting. You do have your academic background, and obviously that coming through was something I found really interesting, and it sort of helped solidify some of the key messages in it. You talk about the ASTUTE framework, ASTUTE framework, but that's an acronym, and it describes a framework. So where did it come from? How did you develop that?
Yeah, as many of these things do, it came about a little bit by accident. So I was having a conversation with a business coach, and she said to me, you need to be able to describe what you do in 30 seconds. And I was like, I do a lot. It's really hard to capture that. And she said, people like flowcharts or frameworks. And I went, how about acronyms? Because they're one of my favorites. She goes, yeah, acronyms are good. And so I started playing around with it, and I realized that there was a system. There was a consistent kind of practice that I went through with all of my clients. And I thought, well, the business that I'd started was called Astute Coaching Services. Let's see how we go with this. And sure enough, I managed to make that process map onto the Astute pretty well, which, I like symmetry. It worked pretty well. And I really like having that, because I can then articulate it really quickly. Like, this is what we're going to do together. This is where it's going to take you, and people have a sense of where we're going with this.
And it's also really easy to remember, which is helpful, especially when you're in a moment of sort of perfectionism panic. Then you sort of got something to lean back,
I
fall
can
back
check my
on.
business card for the spelling.
Yeah, exactly. Well, well, look, just on that, I guess we'll move on to a little bit about you as well, because that's also why we're here, to find out more about you. So what advice would you give to your younger self, if you beyond saying you're going to write an amazing book and don't worry about it, but what sort of advice would you give to our younger self?
That's a very good question, and it depends how much younger we're talking. But I think what I would really like to tell my younger self, and this is being myself from yesterday, is to enjoy the journey and to celebrate the wins, because I realise that I've always been in a bit of a hurry. So it's knock that off the list, what's next? And I think you sort of forget to celebrate the wins along the way. So that's something that I would like to think my younger self and my current self could benefit from a little bit more.
That's fantastic. It is really good advice, and something we forget, I suppose, in today's fast-paced world. And so I guess another question I have, just curious, as someone who reads a lot and wonders about the writing process, what was the hardest part of this book to write for you?
The hardest chapter to write was the one that I thought would be the easiest. And it's actually chapter 13, which is about togetherness in the framework. And the reason I thought it would be easy is because conceptually it's super simple. It's really about finding your people and the connection that comes from being with the right people and what that enables you to do. And so it makes sense. No one's going to argue the point. And when I've presented this framework in workshops and with clients, we almost gloss over it. Like, it's almost, we can take it for granted that no one's going to argue with that. And yet, when I came to write it, I found myself really struggling to articulate what it meant and why I wanted to share this chapter. And what I did was I slipped back into old habits of very academic writing, and I got super stats, and I got really good data, and I had evidence about, the benefits of connection, and I had the Harvard happiness study in there, and I had like brain scans of how rejection feels like, scans like physical pain. And I was crushing it with this evidence. I went, oh my God, this is boring. And it didn't make it in. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this just is such an outlier, this chapter. I'd been authentic and I'd been real and I'd been honest. And then I started throwing stats in there and I was like, oh, this isn't very good. So I sort of had to do a bit of a rethink. Yeah. And it was actually at a point in the writing process where my daughter Maddie and I had a slight glee addiction.
Oh, yes, I understand.
And we had committed to each other in a very inappropriate way that we wouldn't watch an episode without each other. So I was in this group of data and Maddie said, Mum, come and watch Glee with me. I'm like, sold. Okay, so we're going to go and watch Glee. And I'm sitting there watching Glee and my brain's obviously kind of processing all of this, and I had a panic attack. And I've never had a panic attack before, and I hope not to have another one again. And I knew enough about it to know what it was, but I was like, where is this coming from? It's this bloody chapter. So I CBT'd my way out of it, which is, pull that out. Yep. And I tried really hard to just forget about it. And I had a shower and I did some meditation and I did all these lovely things, and I went to bed and I could not sleep. I was like, oh, this chapter. And I was like, okay, talking about tuning into intuition, I was like, all right, what is it? And it came to me that the reason that I couldn't write this chapter is because the story I was trying not to tell was the one that had to be told. So I got out of bed, by this stage it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I went downstairs and I was like, okay, so this is the story that I vowed and declared would not make it into this book, and it's in there.
And it's beautifully written and it's wonderful. Really, it's incredibly moving. You just had to let it flow, obviously, and that would have been so cathartic and difficult. And from the writing process to come from there is obviously really genuine. So, and the book reflects that. I guess my next question is then, how has writing this book changed you as a person? Do you think, if at all? I mean, that's quite bold of me to ask that it has, but presumably there's some change there.
No, I think it has, and I've been reflecting on that, and what's come to me is Bridget Jones's Diary.
Perfect.
So the scene where, for those of you who haven't watched it, it's a classic.
And you should. It's very good.
She goes to this party.
Is it 1, 2, or 3?
It's one.
Okay.
And it's a prostitutes and priests party.
Yes.
Well, she thinks it is, and she's in the bunny costume.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, not that.
And no one else is wearing fancy dress. And that's what this felt like. It's that I'm in a room where I'm in my undies and everybody else is fully dressed, right? And so at first that was very uncomfortable, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But what I've discovered too through that process is that being vulnerable makes you brave. So it's kind of like exposure therapy, where the thing that you fear the most, you can either build up to it gradually or you can jump in the deep end. This is jumping in the deep end, and I didn't drown.
Yeah.
So that's kind of helped me to be brave in other ways, and also check the dress code for the parties. Yeah.
It's good advice across the board there. I guess I'll just ask this question as well, because it making such a huge change to go from academia to go to being an author in a relatively short-ish period of time, I suppose. What does your family think about your new status as an author and your book?
I don't know. Should we ask them? No? Don't want to share?
It's okay.
It's only what. Well, I think Hugo up the back, he actually wondered how I got in the jar, which is on the front of the book. Bax hasn't actually read the book, so he probably can't speak to it. Mads, what do you reckon?
Well, what's the question? Hang on, I'll see it.
What do you think about not writing a book? And
Do I go up to that thing? Okay. Okay. Hi. I keep bragging about it at school. like I literally brought people along. And I just think it's really cool because writing a book is really cool. Yeah.
Maddie, she has offered to become my social media manager.
Yeah.
perfect.
And her first piece of advice was, I've got to get on TikTok.
Solid career move.
I was like, sweetheart, I don't understand. Like, what am I going to do on TikTok? And she goes, Mum, you've got to dance. I'm like, how is it going to sell me books? And she's like, no. Everybody's parents who go on TikTok go viral, and then everybody will know
true.
you, and then they'll buy your book.
It's a solid plan. We didn't plan that. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's great to have support, and obviously, it's not only wonderful to write a book; it's incredibly difficult. Anyone who's ever written a book, I'm sure you may have found it easy, you may have found it hard, but getting to the point of genuineness that you did is really quite challenging. So it's amazing. I suppose my next question, and we've only got a couple left, and then I suppose we'll throw it to people who've got a few more. So I'll make this as quick as we can. But what's your greatest learning or biggest surprise about writing a book? Is there anything where you thought, wow, or gosh, that was harder than I thought?
Yes, and I think what I was most surprised about was that, as I said, I wrote it to help other people, and in doing so, I helped myself. So I found that the product, the outcome is really for others, but I think the process was actually for me. And the reason that I say that is because when you go back and look at your story through a different lens, and the lens is really, what are the lessons and how can I actually present them in a way that helps other people, you kind of take yourself out of the story to let your reader in. And so that really allowed me to look at things in a different way. It allowed me to process things that I thought that I was done with, but actually that baggage was kind of following me around a little bit. And it actually got me to ask questions and to challenge things that I hadn't before. And a conversation that I had with my mum about that race that people who've read it will know. Yes. It was like my mind was blown because I had come to a conclusion about something when I was 14 and I'd never challenged it until I was 40. So there was a really long time when I was believing things that weren't true. So really digging in and understanding that story from multiple perspectives was really quite a surprise for me. Yeah.
And that is that was one of my favourite stories in the book as well. It was really powerful and really beautiful. So, there's lots of those moments throughout the book as well, which really add to the story. I thought, well, it sort of reads like semi-autobiographical, but self-help as well. So I guess, what do you hope your readers are going to take away from your book just on that,
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot. I think the first one is that self-care is not selfish. And that's a lesson that I was very slow to learn. So I think that's one. And the other thing I think is around that idea that we've already touched on a little bit around, if it's not working for you, you don't have to have all the answers before you decide to make a change. So when you're doing that, calculating the cost, and you realize this is costing me more than it's paying me in whatever metrics you're using. When it's car parks versus well-being, let's get a grip on that. But you don't have to stay stuck because you don't know what the answer is for what's next. So I think that for me is really important because otherwise you'll stay stuck forever. So it's about recognizing that just make one decision that this is not okay, and start asking what could be next, and you might be surprised. You might write a book.
Well, just on that, I guess my final question for the night for you, Kate, is I know you've just finished writing this. I know it's only just come out, but I have to ask, what is next for you?
Next. Well,
Hopefully a rest, maybe.
well, maybe. Yeah. Actually, there's been a few developments since I wrote the book, and one of them is that I had a bit of an epiphany, and that was by writing the book, I realized that there's actually a way that I can bring in the things that I loved about academia, because I didn't hate all of it. There were things I did hate, but I didn't hate all of it. And I can combine that with the things that I love about what I'm doing at the moment, which is coaching. And so I've actually started another business, and it's around helping other people to write their books. So author coaching and editing. So get my nerd on with the editing stuff, and the coaching, recognizing that it's there's stuff around strategy and writing, so the actual skill, but also the mindset, because it is, someone described it and I thought this was so accurate. It's the personal development Olympics.
Yes.
And you can do with a friend or a mentor or a support person. So that's been a really fun kind of thing that's unfolded quite organically since I wrote the book. And so my student coaching stuff's still pumping along, but this is another just another little fun thing to do on the side, sort of.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have. I think I'll hand back over.
Great.
We've got some questions on Zoom. Thank
We
you.
do. So for anyone on Zoom who hasn't asked a question yet, please type that in now. We do have a message from Linda, who wanted to say love and congratulations to you, and that she's read your book and highly recommends it to everybody, and highly recommends that everybody in the room buys one because it's been really useful for her.
Thank you, Linda.
And I really hope that your coaching, author coaching, includes do a dance, get it on TikTok, and go viral.
For marketing advice, we've got Maddie in there. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that is actually the best advice I've ever heard for an author. So any authors watching from home, TikTok, dancing, viral. That's it. That's all you need to know. So are there any questions from the audience in real life at the moment? Anyone here want to ask a question? Yeah, so.
I just want to ask how you get over the financial block, especially now we're in COVID, which is a different time possibly from when you were writing the book. Lots of people out of work, unemployed, all that stuff. How do you get over that mindset? The financial security, academia to nothing.
So
we need to just repeat the question so that the COVID people, they're not COVID people, they're the Zoom people.
We're all the same. We're all
It's all COVID
people.
Yeah, it's 2021.
yeah. So the question was how to overcome the mindset of the financial security given COVID. Yeah. So I had actually left academia pre-COVID. So that was kind of, I'd made that leap and had to find a way to land. So that probably wasn't a huge decision for me, but for my clients, certainly, it really is around recognizing what success metrics you're valuing the most. And for me, for health and well-being, you have to figure it out financially if that's the cost of staying. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was another question somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
With the idea of, say, intuition versus intellectualism, in society today, where you actually feel that intellectualism is actually valued sometimes a little more than intuition, whereas in other societies, intuition is valued a lot more than intellectualism.
Yeah.
How do we change a societal consciousness to understanding how we can use intuition a lot more than actually intellectualism? Not to say that one is, as you very rightly said, not to divorce one from the other, but at the same time to value that sense of intuition and also have others around you accept that sense of choice made by intuition.
Yes, that's a good question. So the question for the Zoomers, is that what we're calling them?
Yeah, we're calling them Zoomers.
That's a good name. Was around the emphasis on intuition versus intellectualism and recognizing the role of both. Is that, yeah. So I think for me, it's actually about having these conversations and recognizing that even with a background in academia, in science, in empirical evidence, I'm going to put my hand up and say it's not enough on its own, and recognizing that when I do make decisions in that way, I really often come to regret them. So that was part of why I wanted to share that in the book around normalizing that kind of decision-making process and recognizing that, yes, you need to think about it, but you also need to feel about it as well, which sounds a little bit odd, but it's really important, I think, to have those conversations and be open to saying, yeah, that's one of the things that I do to know that my decision is a good one. And I recognize that back before I did this routinely, I would still evaluate a choice by, do I have peace about it? And that was kind of a bit of a nod to the fact that I wanted to feel good as well as think I've made a good decision. Yeah.
Any other questions from the room? I'm keen to know about.
I think my TikToking agent has a question.
Okay. Just before we go to her question,
Yeah.
I'm keen to know about. There's, it's such the kind of, I suppose, self-help space is such a space crowded with people who don't have a background in thinking really deeply. How do you break through that to create a book that's this well researched and thought through in an area where people, are not necessarily, who are just kind of putting something together and chucking it out in the world?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I hope I've done it. I don't really know. For me, I think it's about being really true to who I am and saying, yes, I do have a background in academia, and hence the title, do I claim it or not? But also I'm a real person, and this is my lived experience, but I've integrated it with research. So I haven't just sat down and gone, you need to know about me because I've got something to tell you. It's actually linking it back and saying it's not just my musings, but it is based on, I can make the connection going, this happened and this is how I felt about it and this is why. So kind of giving that holistic approach.
Right. I think you'd made the right choice with the PhD on that too.
Manager.
Oh, okay. So I kind of have two questions. First, and it's not as academic as these ones, but did you have a favorite chapter to write?
That's a very good question. Do you want it to be the one about you? I've got a suspicion. I think my book is like my children and that I don't have a favourite.
Very good.
But I enjoyed writing the introduction about the people who drove into the ocean because I thought it was really funny.
That was very funny. It was very funny.
Yeah. So I had I actually can't tell a joke without laughing at it. That's true. You need to Google it. It's absolutely true. So I can't tell a joke without laughing at myself. And I was actually sitting there in my mum's apartment going, this is so funny. I hope everybody else laughs because I'm absolutely loving it. So that's my favourite bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my second question was kind of like that. Did you enjoy writing the funny bits? Did you laugh at your jokes? That was kind of...
I did. I felt all the feelings. So I laughed at the funny bits and I cried at the sad bits, and I rode the roller coaster that I think my readers will ride. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
And there's a question from the audience too.
And my question is, as a scientist,
Yeah.
which is a very different kind of writing from this book, what do you have to learn or unlearn to be able to write?
Good question.
That's a great question. And I think it's more the unlearning that you need to do.
So the question was, as a scientist, what do you need to learn or unlearn to write a book like this?
Yeah. I think for me, it was learning to trust that what you have to say stands alone. So you don't have to then go and find a reference for it. You don't have to cite it. Just say it. And for me, I had to practice. And I practiced by writing blogs. And it's actually quite funny because I looked back over the evolution of my blogs, and the first few, I had references in them. I couldn't allow myself to just say what I thought. I was like, I'm going to go find someone else who said it first. Because that's how you do it, right? In academia, you have to justify everything. So for me, it's unlearning that you need to find someone else who said it first and trust that what you have to say is enough.
That's profound. That's good for the writers in the audience too, because you often read books where it's just the research is on the page and it's too much. You're not reading an academic book and you don't want to read the research.
Yeah,
it's really very profound. Any other questions before we go to signing? No? Okay. Well, did you want to have any final comments before we finish up?
I think Kate said it all.
Kate has said it all.
Wonderful job.
I think that's true. Look, this has been really interesting, and I reckon everybody should read this book. It's, we all need a little bit of self-help, whether we are good or not. And I think that this is one of those books where it marries the best of both worlds, the best of the self-help and also the best of the rigorous intellectual understanding. So thank you very much to Kate.
thank you.
A very warm welcome to this book, Why Being Good Can Be Bad for You, New in the World. Thank you for the conversation, Laura, and thank you.
Laura.
So see you later to everybody on Zoom. We're about to expel you, so thank you very much for coming. And we will party on without you, I'm afraid. But do contact us if you do want a signed copy of the book, and we will make sure that we get one put aside for you. So for everybody in the room, what we're going to do now is we're going to make this into a signing space. So the books are at the counter, and what we're going to do is we're going to put this table at the other end of the room so we can reconstruct the room. If you happen to be on a